All right, so one of the questions that people have asked me a number of times is, what do I think about Chinese hook swords? And so far my short answer has been, I don't know, I've never handled them, but they seem interesting. And I've never had sharp steel hook swords, but I do have these synthetic practice ones that Purple Heart Armory makes now. And I'm going to approach these with a blank slate, meaning I don't know anything about the history and how they were used, etc. I just find it interesting to see what I make of them, just messing around with them basically, based on my background in historical European martial arts. So keep that in mind. Any observations I make about these are just my personal impression. They're not expert opinion, they are not rooted in history directly, but let me know if you do know a lot about these, if what I can come up with, if that's similar to how they were used. So first off, as far as the overall shape is concerned, I very much like this guard here, this crescent blade that, as far as I know, is sharpened. And so you can parry with this, but you can also attack with it. You have a spike here. And then the hook, as far as I know, is sharpened on the inside. I don't know if it's sharpened on the outside, but probably not here, maybe further up. So as far as cutting is concerned, I would think you could maybe cut this way. If the hook is beyond the target, you can maybe cut that way, but otherwise you would just strike with the hook. And if this is pointed, this would of course enter. This would be a pretty mean weapon if you think about it. Just imagine this just entering behind the collarbone and hooking behind it. Oh, this would be exceedingly painful, and you would even be able to control the opponent that way if you hook into them. Of course, you can hook limbs, you can hook the weapons, and Lucas and I were experimenting with those. He has a background in SCA, so we tried out what techniques we could come up with and see how they work against a two-handed sword, which I find more intriguing than against another pair of dual swords, and definitely against a single-handed sword. That would be quite a disadvantage. Against sword and buckler or sword and shield, that's more even. Anyway, so some of our observations are that against a two-handed sword, you can't rely on statically blocking with just a single one. So if you wanted to stop an attack, you would really need both of them, because otherwise the sheer power of a two-handed sword is just going to blow right through and is going to hit you anyway. But what you can do is try to strike it aside and then hook the blade. Now that was a little bit difficult for us because the synthetic ones are pretty slippery against one another, whereas sharp steel blades bind more, so it's easier to actually catch that and try to trap it with the hook. So in that case, against a longer weapon, the difficulty becomes moving into your ideal range without getting hit. And once you're there, you have a clear advantage. So if I'm already at a distance where I can strike this guy, and he has a longer weapon, he is kind of screwed, because I can bind it up, I can strike in a number of ways, either with the hook or with the crescent blade. I can use the point here to thrust with, you can punch with it, and of course you can imagine what that would do, especially to the neck. So there's a lot of things you can do at a distance that would not be available with other weapons. The one drawback is you can't really thrust, as far as I understand. If the top is sharpened, then maybe to an extent, but I think would be more likely to do sort of a thrusting cut where you slide past and cut with the edge, perhaps, but of course generally thrusts are out. And this gives you a lot of options. If you manage to catch the opponent's blade right here, this is a very good spot. There are a lot of corners that allow you to trap an opponent's weapon. So you can bind the weapon, control it, move in, hook the legs or other limbs. Particularly hooking the wrist can be quite effective, or hooking over top of the guard. One thing I find interesting is considering how it would work the other way around. Now, if the inside here is sharpened, that's probably not really a good idea to hold it there. But generally, Now you have essentially an axe. You can cut with that. You can actually thrust with that point. And again, if this wasn't sharpened, you would have this hook here to make sure the hand doesn't slide off. So this would actually be a pretty interesting weapon in of itself, but I don't think it was used that way, at least not that I've seen. I got that, and then I got the... I think I'm liking it better this way. Now I can thrust. And for a crazy long distance surprise maneuver, you can hook them together and strike with that, which I don't think is a good idea. It's basically just something I made up based on the animation that Kabal has actually in Mortal Kombat 11. That looks pretty badass. Maybe there is some kind of practical application for it. I don't really see it, because if you were to strike something, it just falls down. But maybe there's something that I don't know. So they look like fantasy weapons at first glance. In fact, if I hadn't known that they exist in real life, then I would have just said this is total fantasy. But it's a great design as far as I'm concerned. I think these would work quite well, really. They give you so many options, and I certainly wouldn't mind trying out a sharp one if I can get my hands on it. I haven't seen any high quality reproductions that are fully functional and all that. If anybody knows anything, let me know, because it would be interesting to do some cutting tests as well. And plus also, it would be great to try this on a zombie head, because I think this would probably be pretty brutal, this hook. Anyway, that's all I've got for right now. There's a bit more footage of us doing light sparring to figure out how these work. So if you're interested in seeing that, stick around. Otherwise, thanks for watching.
Put that right in my throat.
I did a thrust, forgetting that that's not effective. Where did you go? Oh, sorry. Almost protected me, but it got not go there. Oh. I would have to strike at the same time already.
Yeah.
So let's say, boom.
Exactly.